this. These are really cheap, but
okay.
you got to buy a bunch of them, so they end up not being that cheap. So you need a ballpoint pen to impress on this. So this is buddy tape. Buddy tape is perforated, and it's extremely stretchy. See how stretchy it is?
Yeah.
And I can take this and I can actually stretch it out like about right here.
Or so what farther. Variety is this?
This is the Amicron.
No, this.
Oh, this is called Red Spy. Supposedly a red.
Well, that's funny. We were just talking about that because we think we have a
Northern.
Yeah, Northern Spy.
This one I like better than the Northern Spy. It's got a real good flavor. So the first thing I do is I take my Scion, and this is called, I'm going to do Z grafting. So I find on my Scion, the Scion is sometimes smaller or bigger than the rootstock. This allows you to match the Scion diameter with the rootstock diameter in kind of a intelligent way, and where both sides will touch the rootstock. And the way to do that is you're bisecting a circle at a certain depth, and you're doing it on here, and so you're getting both sides will match, and you'll see that in a second. So with Z grafting, and you can find a couple videos on the internet about it on YouTube. But with Z grafting, you want to first do the small, whatever diameter is smaller. If your rootstock diameter is smaller than your Scion, then you do your rootstock. If your Scion is smaller than your rootstock diameter, then you do your Scion. So in this case, the Scion diameter is smaller than the diameter of the rootstock. So I'm going to go with this. The first thing I do is I hold the Scion upside down, and you can tell which way is up because the buds always in apple will always be pointing upward. So now I have it upside down, and I find a good length. This is called internode. This is a node where a bud comes out, and internode is where there are no buds, the in-between place between the buds. And so this is the internode, and so I find an internode that's long if possible. And so here's a good long internode. Then I find below that, I find a bud. Here's a bud. I create a cut with pruners going at a 45-degree angle upward and opposite to the bud. So here's the bud. I'm going to translocate my pruners, and I'm going to cut here. Now I have a 45-degree sort of angle pointing up and away from the bud right here. So I'm just going to put one bud on this, or two buds. But if I can put 1, 2, or 3, in this case, I'm probably going to put 3 because these buds are so closely spaced, I can. Generally, you don't want to go more than 3 buds. So I do 2 buds, but I'm going to put an extra bud here because they're so close and I can. Okay, so the next thing is I look here, and I'm going to make a whip. This part's similar to the whip and tongue graft, but I'm going to make a whip cut downward parallel with the Scion, and I'm going to do it without cutting myself. So I'm going to do it slowly, and I'm going to kind of move slowly, and so that the knife will be close to my fingers, but my fingers will be pushing against each other, so the knife will have nowhere to go, nowhere to slip to into my hand.
Gotcha.
And so I'm not going to be, when I do this cut, I'm not going to be going farther into the heartwood, and I'm not going to be going out towards the cambium. The outer layer right here is the cambium. That's the only part of this wood that's actually alive. And those are the cells that are going to bond together with the rootstock. If we don't match this thin layer of cambium enough with this, it won't take. And so matching the cambium is really important. And that's why I like the Z-graft, because it will match on all sides if I do it right here, under all the stress of the video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this in here like this, and I'm going to kind of slowly rock back here, and then take this back like this, and now I have the whip here.
Okay, so you took about a third of that, roughly.
Yeah, and so what I'm going to do, I have a whip, and there's your tongue in here. I'm not going to actually make the tongue on the whip on this particular graft, but you scrape it back a couple times to get rid of the extra kind of duffy stuff in there. Okay. And what this does is it flattens it up a little bit, and it makes for a better bond. And also, those little pieces will get eaten up by bacteria, and so when you scrape it away, they can't get they're not in that graft unit anymore. It's just like when you clean up, the doctor cleans up a wound that hopefully wasn't
Like
from grafting.
Like debriding.
yeah. So now I've created my piece of scion, and remember we did it backwards. So here's up, right? Here's your buds pointing upward, and so I want to look at this piece of scion. You want to kind of inspect it for injuries. So I see injuries here. So I want to definitely do it below these injuries. Sometimes you'll have an injury down below and you just deal with it, But it doesn't make sense to paint the injuries or anything like that because it's kind of like it will hold in the infection.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So you just deal with it. These apples are so resilient, they can get mowed and beaten up and stuff, and they still come back. So how high or low do I go? Well, this is going to be, here's a root right here, so you can plant it, about right here. Assume your ground level. So I would say sometimes you go, if you're doing whip and tongue, you would go at the same diameter where the diameters match, and you'd graft it there. But in this case, I don't want to go too high because I don't want to have a lot of extra sprouts here later on, where people are like, maybe something happens to the top, and then the bottom starts sprouting out, and you're like, I don't know where the apple is, and I don't know where the rootstock begins and the apple ends, right? So it's best to go low. Personally, if I was doing it, if I was doing it for here, I would go much lower than I'm going to show you.
Okay.
Because it makes a better commercial tree. But somewhere in here is probably good. Like about 6 to 8 inches above. So I'm gonna go in here. It looks like there's a good. See, we're going to be matching up here. So you can kind of say like where because you see how there's like curves a little bit in here.
Yeah.
You just find a straight part. Okay, this is kind of straight in here. So I'm going to go about right here. And so I find an area that is a run without any buds, because if you cut through a bud, the wood kind of swirls, right? We know like you can take burls out of trees and make bowls out of them and stuff. So you want the wood grain straighter in here, so it's easier to deal with. So I'm going to cut it here. And that's the same 45 cut. Here's a new paint stirrer or, wood for the fireplace or whatever, mulch. And so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to cut. So now I'm going to bisect this circle in such a way that it's going to, the bisection of this, it's going to create a cut that comes down here. And I want it to match this length here that I have. So I'm going to come in here and it's going to come down like that. And it takes a second to figure out the length correctly. So see, I need to go a little bit farther. It's best to go a little bit short on this because you can then tuck it in and it gives it a little extra strength. So here is your graft. So it doesn't quite match up on both sides, but that's okay because it matches up real good on this side. And there's a little waver in this, so it's not going to grab. But see, watch this. The other one, it would flop around, but I can already go like this, and it's already holding.
Wow.
And the power in that, there's the Z, right? X, Y, Z. And the power in that is you have equal and opposing forces pushing against each other. So you have this angle right here. This flap wants to go back down. So it's trying to push down, and this one's trying to push down, so it tends to push the scion this way. And the more you can get those pushed together, the more the cambium can touch, and the sap that flows through what's called the phloem, Phloem, the phloem will bring callus cells in here, and nutrients to cells that become callus cells. And it'll feed those, and it'll connect, and it'll create a nice callus to help that union harden up. And so this top, the reason why I like this is that you have no exposed wood in a very short time. This is going to callus all over the top, And this end, which I'm going to cut in a second, is going to connect with this wood. And on here, it's completely covered. So you really don't have any major wood exposed. So it not only does it tend to take pretty well, it also it tends to not get diseased in here like some of the other cuts. And because you're overlapping part of the diameter of this and part of the diameter of this, it's more inline. It's more straight inline, and it will create a straighter tree. Whip and tongues tend to sometimes want to go off a little bit to the angle because of the nature of the whip and tongue. So now what I do is I take my thumb and I hold it here like this, and my index finger, and I pinch it tight, and I take my blade end and I put my blade end next to the wood piece. You don't want to go the other way. And I pop that off there, and I pop that off there, and I leave a little bit overlap on it. So see, now there's a little bit of overlap here and here. Mm-hmm. And once you take that off, I took off some of the ability for it to be wedging against itself, so this union will get a little bit more loose. It could fall out at this point. But now you take your buddy tape, and since there is an injury right here, I'm just going to wrap over this injury. That's the convenience of what we can do. And I see that there's a bud right here, so I'm going to take my knife, and I'm gonna nick that bud out right there. That's all I had to do. And then I know that there's a bud right here, but I can't see it, so I'm gonna nick that off right there. And the reason being is that I don't want competing vegetation right here. It's going to be annoying when I wrap it, and it could push this off and cause it to dry out unnecessarily. So after I take this is my buddy tape, right? And it's perforated, so I roll out a piece, and there's a perforated piece right here. And it's because it's new. But once you get, I just opened this, and it has like they stopped the parafilm wax. This is basically wax ribbon, if you will, ribbon tape, and they melt this a little bit in here, so the outer part's a little thicker. But you'll find that when you get in here, the buddy tape's real thin. So I'm actually going to go a little bit farther. So there we go. So see, it's been doubled up here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take that off right there. Now you have a real thin, real stretchy piece. So what I do is even though there's an injury here, but even if there is an injury, I always start a little bit below, so I can put my finger on some of the wood that's below the graft union, and I can begin to twist it because there's more support on this is completely solid wood. This is two pieces I'm trying to bond, so it's easier to start this way. So I wrap it around, and before we wrap this up, I want to make sure that the union is at least on one side as good as possible, which it is. And sometimes you'll find the T-tape breaks, or the not T-tape, the buddy tape will break on a new roll. Your first couple pieces. So basically stretching this out like this, and there you go. Now it's pretty solid in there. Then, just for good measure, I take a rubber band and I pinch it here again, and I wrap it around once. Now it's held. So I hold this here again, and I wrap it out one more time, and I go like this. The cat has something to say. And so after I've wrapped it once in the center, I pull this over, and on this notch right here, and here I wrap it like this. Hold on. Go! Get! Get!
I think it's over here.
Oh, there you are. Go, 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 get. Go, 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 go.
I don't think that's going to work.
I don't think it's going to work. All right. So I'm just wrapping the rubber band in this notch. Oops, let's bring it back out here. Wrapping it here and here. And I'm wrapping it around one more time, and I pull it out like this, and I push that rubber band in there, and since it's a rubber band, I can hold it like that.
Boom.
Yeah, and that takes a little trick to do, but you'll get the hang of it.
Yeah.
Having the rubber band pull here and here that pushes that wood right down. That's where the sap. Okay, so when the tree becomes active again, it's going to start rising its sap, and it's going to try to go to the tallest place it can. And at first, its body is not connected up with this, so the sap's going to well up all in here, and it's going to well up right here. And this is probably where it's going to callus first, and then it's going to callus right up that line, and it's going to callus over here, and then it's going to start to gap. It's going to make callus that will gap that, and then it'll connect its tissue at about the same time that this starts leafing out. Now, the next thing that we do is, this isn't necessary. You can put tape on the top. You can just take a little piece and put this over the top and do it. But I find, might as well take the time. And this like, I've already done, like, a number of grafts by this point, right? So this is like a little bit slower here, but we want to show what's going on. So you take a little piece like that. You got a little piece left over here. Some of the junk that came from opening it up. And you just kind of stretch it around like this so you cover the whole piece. Now, it's not going to dry out. Something could kill it, like maybe the wood's bad or something. I don't think it's bad. It looks like really good wood. But, it's got a high chance of success. You do this kind of things. How do you put a label on? Well, there's a lot of ways to put a label on. But you don't want the label to be falling in the dirt. Like, what was this variety? I don't know. It's buried in the ground, right? So the way that I do it is I hold the label like this, and I twist the end several times so it's not going to fall apart on the end. Then I hold this piece I hold the label like this against the rootstock, and I kind of hold it close, and I turn it once and turn it twice. And notice the wind's happening and everything, and it's not sliding down. Now, if you walk away and just water it and do whatever you're going to do in your nursery and you forget about it, bad. That's not going to work. What you're going to want to do by the end of the season is you're going to want to open it back up, kind of readjust it again, and do that again. And then at a later point, you're going to have branches, and you can let it hang in a branch or something, and it'll be all fine. But this is how you keep your label up out of the dirt, so you don't have to be digging to figure out what's that variety, right? So okay, we'll do the next one quicker. So same kind of thing here. We've got another nice straight run here. I'm going to do a whip and tongue graft this time. So the other thing too is if you're doing a lot of grafts and you're working with a lot of different wood from a lot of different sources in particular, get like a really cheap little water bottle and put isopropyl in it, or Everclear. Everclear works fine too. And then you just spray on your not on the wood, sorry, but you just spray on your tool and wipe it off to keep everything clean. Okay, so I'm gonna make a nice long whip and tongue. So here's the bud. So here's the shoulder of the bud right here. I just put my finger right here, opposite it, and I'm gonna go this way. And you don't want to like work on it like this, but you want to do a nice long cut. So I'm gonna come in here, do a couple long cuts until I get the whip. So like that. Whip is not normally what I do, but everybody else does whip. Just kind of get a straight whip, and then, so the thing about the whip is that this is relatively straight, and then your curvature happens here. So you want to make your tongue, you want to follow the blade back parallel until it begins to clip on the curve, which is right here. And then, so you dig in a little bit higher than you should. So you dig in so you get a little notch first. I made a little notch. And then you work it back. Like that. Now, this is your whip. And here is your tongue. Right there. This is a little groove slot that I made in there. Now I'm going to look at this tree and see where I can put it. There's an injury right there, so I'll just cut that off. I know I shouldn't work with that area. And I'm going to say like, okay, I can probably get in here somewhere and make a nice whip. Okay, so there's a whip right there. And so I'm, same kind of thing on this one. Slow and steady wins the race. So I made another tongue right here. Now I take this, and the way to get these to slide into each other, if you bash it like this, it's going to mess up the outer cambium. It's going to crunch it, and it won't take very well. But what you want to do is you want to bring them together about, so you see there's a groove right here. The groove begins right here, and the groove begins right here. So you bring it together so the grooves match up with each other. And then at this part of the tongue, you use that to push up this part of the whip here. So that now see there's a gap now between the two, and you can slide them into each other. Like that, and you kind of, before they're all the way in, you kind of get it so that they go good, and you push it in there so it's nice and snug. If you push it really hard, it's going to continue advancing this notch that you put in here, and it may muck it up. So you don't want to go too hard on it. But notice that right here there's a gap, right? And this will be a little funky as it heals. And we can't ever, but it will in a couple years it'll callus over and you'll never notice it. And that's why that's the value in doing this graft here, is that I matched or closely matched both sides. But this one right here, because this is so smaller than this, there's a bit of a gap on one side. But the goal is to get it real nice and close on one side. So notice that it's nice and flush on that side.
Yeah.
It's as if now they're one piece of wood. Now, you come in here with your pliers and you just carefully. So you're gonna pull it back a little bit like this. These are actually not very good pruners that these are the ones I used for rough. I shouldn't have grabbed that. These are the ones I use for like rough brush, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Where I'm like, I don't care about my pruners, right? So you have a bud. See how I have a bud right here? It's nice to have a bud low because it's going to try to want to callus. There. So what I'm just going to try to do is I'm going to clip it back a little bit like this. And
So you're not cutting that bud out like you did on the others.
Well, no, because there's a bud right here that's gonna want to callus right here, and now it will push out of it, but it just is the way that it happened. But having a bud low like that's not a bad thing. But I do want to get rid of this rootstock bud here because that's not a good thing. So I nicked that out, and then there's a rootstock bud right here. So I'm gonna nick that out, so I don't have to worry about the rootstock coming up out of this. I'm just going to use this because this is what I have in front of me, you know, waste not, want not. So I'm going to cut it like this. Now I'm going to start this going just like I did with the other one. And before I fully wrap it up, I want to do a little adjustment and make sure it's as close as possible, which it is now. So I'm just going to use the rest of this here and go all the way up to the top, and then once I get up the top, it's kind of, the diameter is getting smaller and smaller. I just twist it a little bit and I pull like this, and it has this little hat, and I just go like this, and there you go, you're done. And then you do the label the same way, and we have a convenient label here that tells us it's M7, but I often will write down in this corner M7 or M26 or whatever the rootstock is. And that's how you do a Z-graft, and this is how you do a whip and done.
Very nice.